Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 56 of PokeClass. I know I said I wasn't going to be doing an episode because it's Christmas Eve, but you have all been putting my views, likes and subscribes so high recently that I thought I'd squeeze another episode out of the year for you. Another reason for doing this episode is because I've seen a lot of controversy and not enough information about a deck everyone has mixed views about, Six Corners. So without further ado, let's have a look at the deck, but first, here's the intro. This deck has been causing a stir ever since it was introduced from Japan as an up-and-coming deck after the release of Noble Victories. It features a ton of beefy basic Pokemon that cover almost every weakness in the metagame right now, which is what makes it such a good deck at the moment. However, players experiencing the deck say that it's incredibly hard to both build and play well, since it takes a lot of metagame monitoring along with being fully aware of the game state while playing. So before we look more into the deck, let's have a quick look at the skeleton list. From looking at the list, it does look a little bit messy and probably even a bit random to a lot of you that haven't heard about the deck yet, so I'll just go over the main idea behind the deck. What this deck is designed to do is have an answer to pretty much every deck you come across and hit for double weakness every time with each of your big Pokemon's attacks. Each deck that you're paired up against presents you with a different strategy, which is why some say that this deck is so hard to play, since the deck is designed to counter everything the opponent does. For example, if you're playing against a Magnezone variant, Terrakion is going to be your attacker of choice, but only when something is being KO'd, since it doesn't hit for much afterwards unless you have the energy required to hit for its 90 damage Land Crush attack. Being able to use Retaliate and KO any Pokemon in the deck really puts them on edge about taking prizes, which they need to do quite quickly since all of your Pokemon have such high HP. This leads me on to another part of the deck, which is that all your Pokemon have ridiculously high HP, making it very hard for your opponent to take all 6 of their prizes before their resources run out. Not only this, but since all of your Pokemon are basic, you can make full use of the new tool card Eviolite, giving your opponent the challenge of hitting for 20 more damage for each one-hit KO they want to get. Since having Eviolite is going to be making all of your opponent's one-hit KOs into 2 or even 3-hit KOs, you're definitely going to have the time to react to the board situation and then start taking a lead in the prize exchange. The final big part of the Six Corners strategy is Shaman. This guy is your absolute rock when it comes to the mid to late game and is probably the hardest part about playing this deck, since you need to time using its poke power ever so carefully to make the most out of it. Energy drops and attachments in this deck do make a ton of difference as you play out the game, so Shaman is here to power up the change in attack you may need when the game state changes, but it can also fix misplayed energy if that ever happens. So onto the other Pokemon we have in the list, and we'll start with Virizion from the newest set. This card has not been seen in competitive play at all in any other deck, but this one, and there's a very good reason for this. First off, it fits the high HP basic clause, but it also has quite a good attack that costs just a single energy. Double Draw allows you to simply draw 2 cards, which doesn't actually sound that great, but could make the difference between having a supporter and not, and gives you the early game card advantage over your opponent. It also has a second attack, Leaf Wallop, which does 40 damage for just another grass energy, which can usually result in a prize on either a baby Pokemon or something weak like Tynamo, which are incredibly popular at the moment. The added bonus to this is that Leaf Wallop then does 40 more damage during your next turn, giving you another opportunity to catch up another basic or stage 1 and hit for 80 damage. That is possibly 2 prizes straight off the bat, which puts your opponent in quite a tough position for the rest of the game. The next 2 Pokemon on the list aren't completely staple in the deck, but they are the 2 main corners of the deck. Kyurem gives you the option to start spreading damage across your opponent's board very early on, which works well against Train Lock decks such as Ross variants and other decks such as Duran. Since it's also armed with the attack Outrage, it can give Pokemon such as Donphan and Reshiram an extremely hard time, since they won't be able to attack it without being hit back for double the damage next turn. Terrakion is there for the 2 most popular cards in the format right now, Magnezone and Zekrom. Since they both carry double fighting weakness, Terrakion is the perfect candidate for dishing out return KOs every time they take a prize with Retaliate. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's able to set up in just a single turn with the help of Shaman and Switch, and then can still carry on hitting both huge damage with just another fighting energy to roll through the rest of your opponent's deck. So with both of those countering around 4 decks between them, you have pretty good coverage already, but you can go even further by including any of the following choices to alter the deck to counter your metagame. The first one is Cobalion. This Pokemon has been popping up all over the place in lots of different decks, but all for the same reason, countering Kyurem and possibly Beartic. With Kyurem becoming a popular choice in decks right now, Cobalion will be your go-to card when you need a Pokemon that can continue one-hit KOing Kyurems, taking full advantage of its metal weakness. Obviously, you'll want to slip a few special metals in the list to power up the attack, and tank even more when you're taking down those Kyurems. Next are the two Pokemon we all know and love, Reshiram and Zekrom. Both of these will focus on using Outrage and can be focused on Pokemon that are double weak to their respective types. For example, lightning weak Pokemon such as Tornadus will be the target of Zekrom's Outrage, and fire weak Pokemon such as Cobalion will be the target of Reshiram's Outrage. Including either of these will depend entirely on what your local players are playing, which is actually quite a hard thing to judge sometimes. Just as another note, instead of Reshiram being used to counter those pesky steel types, V-Create Victini from Noble Victories is also being used by players to give you a guaranteed damage output rather than relying on damaged Reshirams to get those KOs. Since you have a lot of basics and can fill your bench quite quickly, this card is very viable to start doing 100 base damage from just 2 energy. Another option people have been considering as a possible replacement for Virizion is Tornadus, for those more aggressive players out there. Since you're playing quite a high amount of double colourless, Tornadus is a completely viable option to hit for an early 80, getting KOs on your opponent's basics, but it also starts moving energy onto your ready to go counters. This means that you can go ahead and collect it for the specific basics you need for the matchup, and then start hitting for 80 damage while powering up those techs you need to use throughout the game. I don't know how much of a difference not having that turn 1 draw with Virizion is, but Tornadus is still a strong option. On to the trainers and supporters now, and we have ourselves as much draw as possible to keep your deck drawing into resources as often as possible. 4 Juniper and 4 Pont gives you options in both early and late games, since you can use the shuffle draw in the initial turns to start getting energy on the field, and then start using Juniper to hit the resources you need later on. 4 Pokemon Catcher, 4 Switch and 4 Junkarm is enough weaponry to keep your attacks as versatile as possible in each turn with Switch, while giving you a choice of target with Catcher. 4 Junkarm helps you to reuse those resources throughout the game, and possibly use those trainers again you might have been forced to discard with Juniper. 3 Eviolite could be bumped up to 4 because of how important this card is for your strategy, but it is up to the player's choice. You can either keep drawing them with your draw supporters or reuse them through Junkarm if you prefer playing that way. Either way you decide to use them, 3 is the absolute minimum you should have in here because it's so important to your strategy. Super Rod is a card I guess you could call optional, with the high count of Juniper, which may force you to discard your Pokemon and crucial energy. This card can become quite useful in the late game. Another option, as you can see in the list, is Super Scoop Up and or Seeker. Both of these are there simply for Shaman abuse, but they can also let you pick up a highly damaged basic of yours for you to just put down on the bench at full health again. There are pros and cons of both, with the flip being a massive reason for choosing one or the other. You could possibly bump these up to 2 copies of whichever one you choose, but it depends on how many times you really want to be using Shaman in a single game, or how many times you want to be healing your Pokemon if that's even needed. Other than the energy, which is always going to be straightforward when you look at the Pokemon lines included, the list has all been explained. I've tried my best to explain the basic strategy behind the deck, but it's quite hard when each matchup is played a lot differently. People say that the deck is very skilled to play because of all the options and misplays that can be made, but others are just saying that the deck runs off the fact that high HP basics makes it too hard to take enough prizes in time for the opponent. Right now, I haven't done a lot of testing with the deck, but against it, I'm doing quite well in testing, so I'm not too sure about the deck right now. However, City's results are showing that it's winning, so there must be something right about the deck for it to be doing so well. So that's pretty much all I can tell you about the deck known as 6 Corners. I think all players are still quite divided about how good the deck is, but why don't you try it out for yourself to see how you feel about it. Just before I go, I just want to bring your attention to my new Facebook page. I completely forgot to talk about this last week, but I have a new Facebook fan page which you can join, where you can find out about midweek Pokemon updates, both about the videos and about my site. It allows me to keep in contact with all of you during the week, and I can give you information about updates that are happening with things like new decks being added to my site, as well as other happenings in the Pokemon world. If you want to check it out, then click the link in the description below and make sure you get involved. Thanks for watching this week's episode of PokeClass. Make sure you rate, comment and subscribe in the bottom left or top right hand corner in a second, and also check out the intro video for Dot Deck by clicking the thumbnail in just a second. Hope you all have a great Christmas, and I'll see you in the next PokeClass next year.